Suddenly, he remembered that Lydium was still beside him, and he quickly turned back, but saw that Lydium was also looking at the woman with a lustful gaze, just like him. They both remained silent for a moment, then looked back at the woman. The atmosphere was very harmonious. During the daytime break, Lydium opened the system to check the situation of the Diem Phu event, thinking that it had only been one night, and they were still under the specified battle conditions, with each night causing half of the casualties. 164 Diem Phu participants died, with 59 remaining. The killing was ruthless, and the true essence lay in the specified battle. After 12 hours, there were more than 100 participants, with a maximum of 6 days. This fierce battle would come to an end. The intensity was high, and the casualties were heavy, with a very high random element. However, the benefits obtained from the Diem Phu event were 5 to 6 times or even 10 times. The Diem Phu event could receive a high level of danger feedback, enough to break through the level of consciousness of the peak in the inheritance of consciousness. If lucky, he could use the Long Oki 12 to charge 69% of the peak's consciousness. Lydium's consciousness of Ku.U would reach its peak. As night fell, Lydium looked at the CD player, silently thinking that the batteries bought during the day were all dead, and it seemed that he could only find batteries in the midnight world to use. Under the sparkling lights of the Minfuvu nightclub, the girls twisted their bodies to the lively music, the alcohol and hormones mingling into a whirlpool of intoxication. Lydium sat on a corner sofa, asking the girl next to him if anything special had happened recently. After listening to the girl talk about the troublemaker who had come here this morning, Lydium guessed roughly and asked about him. The girl pointed to the VIP room next to her. Without saying a word, Lydium threw a bottle of wine towards the door with a loud noise. The dancing on the floor stopped abruptly. Soon after, the door to the room was kicked open, and a man with a shaved head stepped out, glaring at Lydium furiously. Lydium waved his hand and the guy walked over. When Lydium saw the man's shocked expression upon recognizing him as Thaptu, he felt horrified. Lydium stood up, speaking coldly, "So we caught one. It's strange that we're feeling this way. How could someone fake activity? Someone with a lot of experience hiding their thoughts like that. I didn't expect them to have enough ability to disrupt the world order, which they already had. It's not certain that they can be suppressed even if they come to Diem Phu. It seems like they still want to find some excitement." The shaved head guy didn't hesitate. He came straight at Lydium, kicking over a table in the chaos and taking advantage of the opportunity to run away. A few Toto birds flew out of Lydium's sleeve. Lydium stood up slowly and said, "Wait for me outside." Then he turned back to settle the bill if the kid had money. Half an hour later, Lydium walked out of an alley with bloody hands. The system voice regretfully said that it couldn't receive the inheritance of his opponent. In the dark alley, Lydium washed his blood-stained hands, thinking that since entering this Diem Phu event, he had hardly encountered a real opponent who could control him, but also couldn't be complacent. Some people not showing up didn't mean they didn't exist. It seemed that the assigned battles would be unfriendly to Lydium this time. Someone had set a trap for him, and the casualty rate was high. It was hard to believe that the fights seemed random. Within the range of suppression, they all seemed to be targeting Lydium. Feichi was the one who had escaped, so he could intervene in the activities of Diem Phu. Therefore, he needed to at least not let anyone interfere with his Diem Phu event. At this moment, a voice rang out from beside him, saying, "Become the great leader. At a high level, you have the right to choose, even to have your own benefits. Propose the content of the Diem Phu event to enhance the level of consciousness and inherit the Type 5 fairy. You may receive a portion of the authority to operate Diem Phu." Lydium asked again, "Who are you?" The solemn voice replied, "I am a fruit on the Diem Phu tree, responsible for contacting news, documents, and dialogue with other participants. In this event, the participants prepare their identities before the journey and clean up after the departure. The authority of the participants has already reached the level of Thaptu." Lydium laughed and said, "Based on your tone, I don't want to change my inheritance to the Type 5 fairy. Before becoming the great leader, I didn't have the opportunity to touch the authority of the participants. Now that I want to become the great leader, I want to know what to do." The voice replied, break through the first peak of the inheritance, and obtain the second item of the Diem Phu inheritance. Diem clenched his fist tightly, looking out into the alley. While at the Diem Tru police station, a police officer said to the man in the interrogation room, "Your kid has grown up so big and is still doing something bad, stealing bikes." When he turned his back, he suddenly froze as his handcuffs were opened. The man laughed and said, "Don't worry, comrade. I just want to ask, has there been any unfamiliar and brutal criminals appearing this morning, without any identification, killed and dumped?" Basically, what you said, I've heard it. Let's cooperate with the police in the duty room. Diem lay on the bed, reading Fuyu comfortably. The system voice suddenly sounded, "Please go to the Kwanggaman market gate before 12 o'clock. Your opponent's inheritance is Tafyuong." Diem quickly checked the CD player several times, but still no response. Then he went straight to the alley where the body was dumped, put the body in a bag, and carried it to the Kwanggaman market. The Toto birds had been flying around for more than 20 minutes, but they still hadn't detected anything. The suppression effect of the location was also normal. Suddenly, there was a knock on the wooden window. Diem followed the sound, and a beautiful girl leaned against the window, looking down. He smiled and said, "Are you carrying something, Kugaryuchi?" Diem threw the bag on the ground as the sky brightened. The dead person in the night world would leave their body here when they entered the night. Only the items on their body could be brought in. So leaving the body here was the cleanest and least troublesome way. The girl raised her eyebrows. There's indeed some logic to being a FAP 2-level participant. It seems like it left quite an impression. Diem didn't pay attention to the girl's challenge and said straightforwardly, "You go up, or do you want me to come down?" The girl remained silent, put her hand on the bed, and jumped down from a height of over 10 meters. Diem counted to 2 seconds, and as soon as she landed, he kicked hard with both feet, drew out the Hone long sword like a wave, and slashed straight at the girl's head. Diem found himself in the most dangerous situation since entering Diem Phu, facing the combined attack of the location and suppression without being able to resist. The atmosphere suddenly changed, and the girl's face burst into flames, with flames erupting fiercely from the 7 holes on her face. With a bang, the fire erupted in all directions. Diem was blown away more than 1 meter by the heat wave, his right arm severely burned because he couldn't dodge in time. Looking at the devastation, Diem knew that the girl was extraordinary in the dark alley. The beautiful girl walked away murmuring, "For a man to be so powerful against women, you truly lack humanity." At this moment, behind the girl, Tafyuong Taesongkin appeared. There's a bird that looks like a crane, with 1 leg, a green body, red feathers, and a white beak. It's called Tafyuong because of its cry. Seeing the fierce flames, the girl took off the torch on her head, and her long hair fell down. Suddenly, the strands of hair flew out like flames burning fiercely, and the sweet and graceful scent of the girl was completely erased, transforming into a queen of fire. The flames enveloped both of her hands, from the palm to the fingertips, like fiery swords rushing towards Diem. Diem wielded the Hone long sword to strike back, but the girl's white hands blocked his attack. He exerted all his strength to push down, but the girl seemed to struggle, closing her eyes. She swung her fiery hair towards Diem's face. Diem raised his arm to block and then decisively kneed the girl in the solar plexus. She raised her hand to defend, but was kicked several meters away, her long robe stained with dust and her mouth swollen. She gripped Diem's arm tightly, glaring at him angrily. Suddenly, the girl laughed coldly at Diem. "Kudaryuchi, you are truly merciless." Diem responded with a smile, "So are you." The girl looked behind Diem and said softly, "You seem to be out of luck." Diem quickly turned to look down the street and saw that a chopping machine had been set up, with a man in a white robe pouring wine into his mouth. He took a gulp of wine on the blade of a knife, then smashed the cup and approached a man kneeling with his hands tied and eyes blindfolded. The man yelled, "Brother, brother, please be quick and give me a clean death. Hurry to the Underworld. We also thank you for your great kindness." He pulled off the cloth covering his face, revealing Diem's face, and shouted loudly, "Brother, brother, be quick, let me have it." Then he raised the sword high and struck. Diem saw it and was horrified. Before he could react, the sword fell, and the man's head rolled off, blood spurting from his mouth and nose. The system announced, "One of the 3 lost souls, the traitorous rebel, has been killed. Please note that if all 3 lost souls are killed, you will be forcibly terminated. Quickly escape from the suppression range." Before Diem could recover, 2 assistants on the chopping machine pulled out another person. Diem didn't pay attention to the girl and went straight to the chopping machine, but the girl suddenly let go and seized the opportunity to rush forward and block Diem's path. Her hands aimed straight for Diem's eyes, and a wave of heat surged. Diem quickly glanced at the chopping machine, and the girl took the opportunity to twist her body and deliver a powerful blow to Diem's chest. Diem retreated more than a meter before stabilizing himself, but the danger increased. The man on the chopping machine roared, and the sword on the machine gleamed brightly. Diem suddenly knelt down like a hunting dog, and the girl, seeing Diem continuously suffering from her attacks, finally couldn't withstand her own blow and was hit by the sword, a monster's sharp weapon. She couldn't bear it anymore and fell to the ground, unable to move. The girl laughed with joy, but in the blink of an eye, Diem saw her secretly celebrating and immediately rolled aside to avoid her deceptive attack. At the same time, he twisted his body into a rainbow shape, dodging her attack while drawing the long sword. The girl, suspended in mid-air, unable to change her position, could only stare blankly as the sword flew towards her. The sword pierced through her chest, her heart shattered, and she died instantly. She looked at Diem with an unbelieving expression. Clearly just moments ago, still at the peak of her power, but now facing life and death reversed. The system had achieved the inheritance of Tafuom, the bloodthirsty leader, and at the same time, the chopping machine was ready for Diem's third strike. He pulled out the sword and threw the body of the girl away, then used his strength to throw the sword towards the man on the chopping machine. However, the 3-meter-long silver blade was extremely sharp and effortlessly pierced through the man's body without any hindrance. Diem was shocked and couldn't let him continue to strike. He jumped onto the chopping machine, wielded the long sword, and pierced through both the man's body and head. The third head fell, and Diem spat out a mouthful of blood, horrified. He silently thought that if he couldn't destroy it, his only choice was to escape from the suppression range. The hurried footsteps echoed, and Diem pushed his speed to the limit, running until he finally escaped the suppression range. He leaned against the railing, kneeling down, the sidewalk trembling incessantly. 3 of the 7 lost souls were gone, leaving only 4. He pasted a charm on his chest to feel more comfortable. The system reported, 3 souls have been eliminated, forming the reverse effect of the negative phase. After the event ends, DMFU points can be spent. Suddenly, Diem laughed excitedly, his eyes gleaming with excitement. The system reported that it had discovered the secret of DMFU. At the same time, in front of the restaurant, a man with disheveled hair and beard leaned against his pillow, breathing heavily. His opponent lay motionless on the ground. After a while, he stood up, lit a cigarette, and set the location here. It was troublesome. Yendo, Badailau, Badaiku, to Dave Tuanam, Mayan Bakwe. Then he casually walked into the adjacent restaurant, but before he could enter, he was stopped by the guard, saying it was full. The man glanced at the still empty tables and chairs, then took a deep drag on his cigarette. He clasped his hands and smiled brightly, saying, "Chief, I'm not here to eat. I'm here to learn from Diem." Then he stepped into the underworld again. Mu Jiangqin, who had met him before, asked what he wanted. Diem pulled out a small orange rod and shook it. "I want something like this. Do you have it?" Monthan replied with a smile, "Yes." Then he led Diem to an old man wearing a grass hat and said, "Vuongkok has a guest here." The old man glanced at him unpleasantly. "I don't want human flesh. I want someone alive." Monthan impatiently urged him to stop babbling and quickly hand over the items. With a loud noise, the old man threw out a bag of green apples, fresh meat, and a bowl of blood with the marrow, and Diem silently threw a gold coin to the old man, who looked surprised but still bargained. In the end, he exchanged 25 peaches for 1 coin. Diem breathed a sigh of relief. knowing he now had medicine for his injuries. The old man threw 2 peaches to Monthan without further delay and stopped paying attention to them. Monthan swallowed the peaches and looked at the gold coin in Lydium's hand, saying he still had plenty of business with gold. Lydium then asked if he knew about a food market in Phap Truong, inside a cave on the mountainside, in the valley southeast of Manhasen Temple. There, a tall man with a scar on his face, the one who had attacked Lydium and then fled, was sitting meditating. Next to him was a small girl with a short sword, Lung Longvan, full of vitality. As they approached each other, they stared at each other for a long time. Then suddenly, the girl grabbed his right hand, leaving him with only 3 fingers, the wound still fresh. She quickly grasped his larger hand, expressing dissatisfaction with his injury, and he hurriedly pulled his hand back, seemingly afraid she would worry. He explained that he had accidentally hit a tough opponent, who swiftly cut off 2 of his fingers. The girl angrily exclaimed, "Who dares to harm my brother?" The man laughed and revealed an image of Lydium, revealing that the 2 were brothers, Chiu Tam and Chiu Vo, and this designated fight against DMFU was theirs. The brothers decided to stay in the mountain cave for the night to settle the matter and see if there was anything interesting on the mountain. Back to the underworld, Monthan chuckled awkwardly, saying if he had asked him earlier, he would have told him how to deal with the Phap Truong. Lydium remained silent, knowing for sure there was something Monthan had yet to say. Monthan continued, saying that only a few ordinary people loved luktakku vegetables soaked in brine, and if Lydium wanted to know which shop to visit, he could go see. Hearing this, Lydium asked what Phap Truong was. Monthan explained that it was the law of the underworld, and this punishment was a typical example. The 2 helpers were the great helpers, 2 die. After obtaining the information, Lydium turned to leave but was called back by Monthan. "Please wait a moment. My brother still has something to say." Monthan added that there were rules in the underworld, and whoever reached the Kim would need to take half of it, with the other half reserved for living things. Lydium didn't argue, just brandished his long sword, ready to cut off half a caddy of flesh from his own arm, and threw it to Monthan. He thought to himself that Monthan might have spied on the diamond coins, but he still couldn't sell them. Suddenly, Lydium thought of something, turned back, and threw a large gold coin to Monthan. "That's right, I have something to do tonight. Help me keep an eye out and report if there's any news according to the rules." Receiving the gold coin, Monthan immediately grinned and said, "Just let me handle it in the World Supermarket at night." Finally, Lydium found a suitable pin for his CD player and prepared to sing. "Do I really sound good?" he thought, smiling. It's been a day, and he's still most concerned about that. He thought for a moment before saying, "Honestly, it's really good. Without this incident, you could have become a star. I invite you to eat pickled cucumbers at a certain shop," the waiter said, pointing to luktakku. Lydium wondered why the name had changed, but before he could enter, he was stopped by a waiter. "Sorry, we're not serving customers now." Lydium didn't get angry, just smiled and asked when he could come. The waiter shook his head, saying, "I'm sorry, we can't do business with you." Lydium was about to say something when he felt a sudden cold breeze. He didn't know when, but behind him, a girl with a pair of jade hairpins, wearing a long purple dress, was smiling sweetly. As she appeared, the waiter immediately fell silent. Lydium thought the discrimination was too much and stepped inside. "Isn't it too soon?" he asked. The waiter shook his head. "I'm sorry, we can't do business with you," he repeated. Lydium was about to speak when he felt a gust of wind. Suddenly, Luongjia popped up from the CD player, causing Danong to blush and turn away laughing. Lydium thought it was not the right time for that. After a while of conversation, Lydium and Luongjia came to an agreement. Luongjia would assist Lydium for a few days, and in exchange, Lydium would help locate Luongjia's parents. Just then, Danong's hand paused as she lifted her head. Lydium also stopped eating, gazing towards the door as a cold wind swept in. A young man dressed in a green cloak, donning a red fur hat, entered. Lydium remained expressionless, turning away towards the carrot stand. The young man spoke to the shop owner, referring to him as uncle, mentioning their mother pestering the counter manager. The shop owner chuckled, suggesting that even if they were concealed within the young man, they could still be taken away. Before he could finish, an old yellow-haired dog dashed in, the very one the two men had mentioned. The dog stood up nearly as tall as a person, its multicolored fur bristling. Its blind eyes gazed, its tongue hanging out as it placed its paw on the large $2 bill on the counter. Shortly after, the shop owner hung a packet of sauce around its neck, and Jap-Tu clapped his hands once. The blind dog ran straight past Jap-Tu towards the door, and the two men left together. Dan Huang glanced at Le Diem, who spoke quietly, "Let's stop eating. It's getting dark on the street." With a sudden bark, the knife in hand barked into a dark alley. In the shadowy corner, a white foot protruded. It was Bakho, the manifestation of Le Diem's long-ho spirit, appearing before the cute, knife-wielding dog's face. The knife-wielding dog's head shook, throwing the sauce packet down before rushing forward. At that moment, Jap-Tu stepped on his own red belt, grabbing the tail of the growling dog, which raised the cursed offspring. "You dare strike back in my presence," Jap-Tu said, looking around as if nothing unusual had happened. He bent down to pick up the belt, but as the knife approached, it bit him. Jap-Tu quickly avoided it, falling to the ground. He was about to curse when he noticed the belt had disappeared, and the blade glimmered in the dark. Jap-Tu's head flew up, but Le Diem kicked him away. Though his body fell, there was no blood. Jap-Tu looked at Le Diem, only to see him holding the red belt. Le Diem looked at the knife in his hand and muttered, "The landlord has no choice but to suffer," then stabbed Hon Lam straight into the dog's body. Witnessing this scene, Jap-Tu went mad, his face turning pale. Le Diem paid no attention as Jap-Tu looked at the red belt on his hand. The criteria for killing a pig and slaughtering a heifer, the top 9 deeds, were all displayed on it. Just by wearing this belt, one would become a god, unable to bring out the Diem Phu basin event. Le Diem put away his salary, pointing Hon Lam at Jap-Tu's head. "You're the one who's going to have to suffer," he said before stabbing Jap-Tu's head with his knife. "You came to talk to me. How good is my sword? I do righteous work. If Barry's men hit 3 heads next to me, they have to pay as much as possible. You didn't die even after being hit in the head. That's your nature. I won't hesitate to strike again," Le Diem said before leaving. Suddenly, a headless body appeared on the ground, reaching out to grab Le Diem's foot. Jap-Tu's white, toothy mouth appeared, biting Le Diem's leg. Le Diem shook his leg, kicking Jap-Tu away as Hon Lam's scabbard flickered in the dark. Jap-Tu's head was chopped into pieces, blood and flesh splattering around. Le Diem roared in a gruesome manner, "You've underestimated me, even though you've only been my subordinate for a few days." In the dark alley, Wu Van Ho stood alone, looking down at the blood-stained cloth cap, his face gloomy. In his mind, the image of the girl when they parted appeared. "I warned you to be careful," his voice choked. "You didn't listen to anything." Then he bent down to pick up the blood-stained cloth cap, holding it to his chest. His once handsome face began to twist and distort, deforming on the chopping block. In the time market, people wearing hats leisurely smoked tobacco, chatting with their disciples about the old days. At that moment, a slender figure appeared in the alley. Beside the two men, Jiapluk pointed to the alley and muttered, "It seems that the little two is gone." "What the hell happened?" "We didn't see anything," one of them replied. Then Le Diem threw the sauce packet aside and walked towards the two men. As he passed by, he stepped through the stone lion statue at the gate without avoiding it. The knife-wielding landlord glared angrily at Le Diem, kicking a round head towards Le Diem's feet. He bent down, and it turned out to be his own head. Le Diem didn't care, throwing the head aside. "I heard that when chopping heads, the knife-wielding landlord is indifferent. When the knife is swung down, the person's eyes are still open, and even when it falls, they still manage to wink 3 times and smirk under the golden stream." Then, a demonic smile appeared on Le Diem's face. "Today, I'm giving you two a smile under the golden stream," Le Diem said. The knife-wielding landlord said nothing, advancing towards Le Diem with his divine sword. The blade gleamed as he extended his hand towards Le Diem. In some fly-filled shop, the headless chef trembled, hiding behind the cupboard. 2 men sitting across from each other at the table frightened him. The table was full of beer, and a man in a suit, completely focused on the video game, asked impatiently to the man with a game console in his hand, "Are you done?" The guy in the suit quickly put away his game console, raising his hand to apologize. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Nahami," he said before handing over the requested items. "These are the materials you requested, including all the records of the Diem Phu event, including inheritance, specialty purchases, and so on," said Vosen, the man in a suit. Then Namnai handed over the items and said, "This is what you asked for." The silver-haired man asked in surprise, "This isn't the first time I've traded with the master's people, but why have I never seen you before?" Hamin replied succinctly, "I'm new here." Although the master closes his eyes and pretends not to see, others in Thok's truck still keep an eye on it. Vosen quickly checked the mysterious places: Fuang Haian Min Street, Women's Territory, and the Hill of Genius. There was even a 5-year-old fairy who had not yet matured, which he had seen a few times. The revived inheritance was also a powerful type of martial art. Suddenly, Vosen squinted his eyes and saw a girl with green and white hair intertwined. He chuckled with delight. "Finally found you." At that moment, Nam-in pointed to one person, saying, "This person is not very well liked in the universe. If possible, kill him." Vosen glanced at the plan of the Chai Ling, a directorate. The inheritance was too weak, lacking interest. The scene returned to Diem. He avoided the divine sword strike from the landlord, despite his claim of having a cold mind. However, facing the bloody aura emanating from the landlady, Diem still trembled. Throughout his life, she had killed hundreds of people. Just her breath full of murderous intent was enough to scare ordinary people. At that moment, Jiapluk dragged a blindfolded man towards Diem. "Damn it, this trick again!" Diem cursed inwardly. Jiapluk kicked the blindfolded man down, holding a long knife, spraying a mouthful of cold water. The landlord's 2 eyes lit up, enhancing his attack to buy time for Jiapluk. The moves were somewhat chaotic. Diem tried to suppress his fear and rushed forward. The landlord swung his sword, aiming at Diem's left side. In an instant, it was a matter of life and death. Diem used his right hand like an iron clamp, grabbing the old man's wrist. Then, he delivered a powerful punch to his face. While falling, the old man still swung his knife. Angry, Diem snatched the divine sword from the old man's hand and threw it back at Jiapluk. The divine sword spun and flew towards him. Jiapluk widened his eyes and tried to dodge, but in the blink of an eye, Diem was already in front of him. Diem tightened his left hand around Jiapluk's neck, pressing it against the nearby pillar. Jiapluk's head slammed into the pillar, his eyes rolling back, tongue sticking out. He glanced at the divine sword by his side, reaching out to grab it. Diem sensed his intention, gripping Jiapluk's neck tightly and twisting it forcefully. Jiapluk's neck snapped, causing him pain. Diem then pressed on his wound, squeezing Diem's ribs tightly. Diem's facial muscles twitched, increasing the pressure on Jiapluk's neck. At that moment, the divine sword rushed forward, wielded by Nu Ni behind Diem, aiming at his back. Diem's eyes widened, glaring at the old lady attacking from behind. With his right hand, he grabbed the divine sword next to him, swinging it across the old lady's neck. Blood splattered, and the body of Jiapluk slipped down the pillar helplessly. The landlord couldn't believe what he saw before him. Diem stepped aside, kicking the old lady's knee joint, causing her to fall. He raised the divine sword high and chopped down. Blood sprayed like a fountain. Looking at the headless body of the landlord, Diem muttered, "2 people have laughed under the golden stream." Then he removed the red belt and placed a peach in the mouth of his own tightly bound, blindfolded body. He muttered to himself, "My 7 souls are so scared like this. It's really shameful." Then he clapped his hand on his body, and the white light disappeared without a trace. In Diem's hand appeared a black copper coin, the secret of Diem Phu. It could be obtained through any kind of fruit, consuming a lot of mana. The inherited skills could be enhanced once, and the requirement for the inheritance was any of the 42 items. "Here's your Chai Ling, a plan," Nam-in said. "You meet the conditions for enhancing the inheritance. You can choose to enhance skills like Vi Hayat to you. After enhancing Vi Hayat 2, it will be accompanied by damage of a fixed value to the 7 souls, weakening the opponent's 5 senses. After enhancing Vi Hayat 2, the side effects will be even weaker. Diem thought to himself, the treasure of Diem Phu is enough to kill 6 people. I can go back now. The sky began to darken as the 2 worlds changed again. In a factory in the west, a big man grabbed Bui Van Ho by the collar, growling, "You've had enough." Tan Daitri, a 20-year-old girl, walked up. He's new here and not used to the system yet. It's just by chance that it's come to this. The man also knew to let go. Bui Van Ho sighed in relief. The little one has only been here for 2 days and has already hooked up with the boss's daughter. Quite bold, he said. The girl also ignored him, going straight to Bui Van Ho. Don't mind him. If you need anything, just tell me, she said, looking at the beautiful face in front of her. Bui Van Ho pushed his glasses silently, staring at the girl. At the Loo station after visiting Longjia's parents, Diem sat next to him, recounting Jia Luan's family situation. Both uncles were still healthy, but life wasn't good. His mother was paralyzed from a blood clot, lying in bed, and his father, 60 years old, lost his job at the factory, earning 82 dong a month. Ni cried bitterly. Diem sighed, life is cruel, making people so miserable. The train rushed by, and Luangjia, calm again, stood up and said solemnly to Diem, "Hey, I can see you're not an ordinary person. I have one request before I go. Please leave some money for my parents, and then, if you need this lifeless body, I'll give it to you." Diem remained silent for a moment, staring intently at Luangjia. "Do you want to live?" In a small restaurant near Yendo Pedagogical University, Dan Nuong leaned back, her smile as beautiful as a flower, catching Diem's attention. The beauty of the character attracted the gaze of several students standing outside the door. Suddenly, the chubby owner of the restaurant roared, "What are you looking at?" The young men chuckled and left. Diem took out a CD and asked Dan Nuong seriously, "Can you turn Luangjia back into a human?" Dan Nuong waved her hand and said, "Not yet." Diem then said, "First, we need to restore your strength. What should I do?" Dan Nuong placed her hand on her chest with a grim expression. "I need a lot of souls, like the 4 souls from the landlord last night," she said mischievously, looking at Diem teasingly. "Can I ask you a question?" Dan Nuong continued, "You didn't leave any money because you didn't want to deceive Luangjia, right?" Diem remained silent. Dan Nuong added, "I think that's your choice." Diem suddenly felt conflicted and muttered to himself, "This issue is even more complicated than Duthuk." Unexpectedly, Dan Nuong's expression changed suddenly. Diem realized he had spoken too hastily. "Sorry," he said, then pushed the plate of food towards Dan Nuong, who looked up and smiled lightly. In the attic room near the gate of the Pedagogical University, Ongtin slapped Diem's face. "Are you skipping classes?" Diem bowed and apologized, flattering him with a few words. Ongtin went from anger to laughter. He thought to himself that although this kid skipped class, he worked hard, and he was articulate and clever. In this era of poor security, with fewer male students and more female students, they often competed and became jealous. Thugs often caused trouble. A healthy young man like him staying here was much better than Ongtin. "Hey, there are only 2 more days until Tet. Won't you go home to visit your family?" Ongtin teased. Diem pretended to complain, "No, my mom keeps urging me to get married. I'm so tired of that." Ongtin suggested, "Then marry a student. I hear the duty room is quite comfortable." The 2, one old and one young, discussed female students until the shift changed. As night fell, Diem lay on his bed, the sinister face of the landlord always appearing in his mind, making him feel tired and scared. Looking at the status bar, Diem muttered to himself, "This is the consequence of being slashed 3 times. Then he started the CD and said to Luangjia, "Luangjia, help me tonight. Sing a gentle song." Diem clasped his hands behind his head and gradually fell asleep. When the song ended, he opened his eyes and the slashed status bar had faded significantly. Suddenly, the system voice echoed, "Go meet your opponent at Dongbak Farm before midnight." Change your name to DMFU. In a narrow alley in Diem Than, Diem Phu stared blankly at the streetlight, his face expressionless. Next to him, Tree was tied up on the ground, cursing. At that moment, a strong man approached. Tree screamed for help, claiming that Diem Phu wanted to kill him. The man stepped back, his face serious. "You don't need to perform my inheritance ritual," he said. Diem Phu grinned and replied, "At night, whatever the body touches will boil until midnight, even if it's a living person who kills you." The man laughed and clenched his fists. "You're crazy," he said. Diem Phu chuckled oddly. Meanwhile, Diem stood at bus stop 118, wondering if there were still buses running at this hour. He didn't know if Luangjia could be trusted. As Diem pondered, a bus approached. After hesitating for a moment, he boarded with a cold expression. "My mother doesn't know the bus is still running at this hour," he thought. The dim light cast an eerie atmosphere. Diem scanned the empty seats until the last row, where he took a deep breath. It was Ongtan and Ko Vuong. Diem turned back, deep in thought. La Tan is right. It's like this, he thought. The two didn't notice Diem and continued their intimacy. Suddenly, Ongtan looked up, only to see the back of a person standing in front of him. He recognized Diem and was startled. It can't be, he thought. Why is this rotten kid here? What a coincidence. At that moment, Ko Vuong was still rejecting advances. Seeing Ongtan's silence, he asked, "Do you see the new guy in front of us?" Diem sensed trouble and coughed loudly, then spoke fluently in the local dialect to the bus driver. Ongtan relaxed, explaining to Ko Vuong, "It's not him, listen to his voice." The two continued their intimacy on the bus. Meanwhile, in the alley of Diem Than, Tree looked at Diem Phu with terrified eyes, murmuring, "Please don't kill me." Diem Phu kneeled beside him, ignoring his body. "I want to ask you, do you gamble every day?" Then, looking at the clock, he said, "I have to hurry. We'll talk later." The Fangievian casino, like the underground rivers, became lively at night. Kavo Thuong, wearing a suit and a black hat, looked at Diem Phu. "What do you want?" Diem Phu hesitated for a moment, then pointed to Tree. "Bet a pair of dice outside the Van Mu gate," he said. Vosen drank his wine and muttered to himself, "The inheritance of Lai Dai is a 76% specialist in martial arts. Its penetrating power rivals that of a large gun. Even a grand enlightenment is hard to avoid." Hearing Vosen's nonsense, Lai Dai remained calm and smiled. "A passing glance is enough. With the support of Diem Phu, it seems that luck is on my side," he thought. Vosen threw the wine bottle on the ground with a clang. On the streets of Tin Man, the shops illuminated brightly with red lanterns hung all over the street. Chiu Tam leaned against a column, both hands holding the long van sword casually while whistling a tune. As the drizzle fell, Chiu Vo staggered forward. "Why are you so fast?" A girl stood up, clapping her hands. "That's enough, husband." "How are you holding up?" The man chuckled awkwardly. I'm still okay. Let's keep going." Though Chiu Vo's face looked quite terrible, his tone was resolute. "Just one more night. With 6 of us, we'll go together." Chiu Tam seemed to understand something, nodding heavily. At Fangievian Casino, Cao Vo Thuong slammed his hands on the table, his eyes fierce. "I won again. I bet my ribs, take it. I bet the fish." Looking at Tree trembling with fear, Diem Phu said, "We've played over 20 rounds and I've never lost once. What are you afraid of? Don't you care about the people under your feet?" He raised his head to look at Cao Vo Thuong. "You've lost everything. What do you have left to bet against me?" At that moment, a little lawyer beside Cao Vo Thuong pulled out a piece of golden paper. "You've already taken out liver, lungs, and ribs. Only this is left. Are you betting or not?" Understanding it was a Diem Phu inheritance, Diem Phu nodded lightly. "This is almost equivalent to the previous debts." Hearing this, Cao Vo Thuong's expression changed, his smile turning cold. "You've had enough tricks up your sleeve, Quach. The old man at Quoc Tu Jiam truly pities you, huh? He says everything for your sake." Diem Phu remained silent, taking out a black gemstone. Kao Vo Thuong's expression changed entirely. All eyes now focused on him. "You're more ruthless than I thought," Kao Vo Thuong said with a serious face, clapping his hands. "If I lose, everything you promised earlier, plus the remaining souls of Kwok Tu Jian will belong to you. But if I win, then the man under my feet, along with the remaining souls of Kwok Tu Jian, will all belong to you." Kao Vo Thuong slammed his hands on the table, his eyes fierce. "I don't know where you came from, but I can tell you clearly, as a living person, you can't just be pulled here at will. What you're doing is breaking the rules. Those who don't follow the rules in this world won't live long." Bui Van Ho remained calm. "Well then, I won't bother you anymore." Kao Vo Thuong looked at the black gemstone on the table, contemplating for a moment before saying, "Regardless of whether you win or lose, everything you promised earlier, we'll need to put it in writing. The rules of the underground market are the most important. We'll draw up a contract. If you agree to use your soul as collateral, then we can start the game." Bui Van Ho nodded solemnly, his face filled with sorrow as he looked at the black gemstone on the table, and calmly said, "Let's get started." After a perilous journey, Lai Diem finally arrived at the Dong Bak Vuong livestock farm. As he watched the bus fade away, his mood grew heavier. He felt that today would be a difficult battle. As Lai Diem stepped into the forest of the farm, the system voice rang out. "Your opponent is the inheritor of the Jia Lang Bin family, known as DUAM-DU. The Jia Lang Bin family is also known as Du-DUAM, which means a pleasant sound that people never tire of hearing. This bird species lives in Toyat Sun and has already begun to chirp." Its harmonious and beautiful singing approached. Suddenly, cheers echoed all around. Lai Diem quickly looked around but saw no one, only hearing the whistles and cheers echoing everywhere. He prepared to move forward when suddenly there was a loud explosion in front of him. Dust filled the air, and when it cleared, a large outdoor stage appeared before him. Lai Diem, holding the CD disc in his hand, felt uneasy. The effect of the sound-absorbing wine was added. It probably wasn't a good thing. The sound of footsteps echoed lightly. A dark-skinned man approached Lai Diem. He suddenly pulled out a leg bone knife from his hand. The opponent also had space to cope with the 10 level. Lai Diem didn't hesitate either, swinging the Hoang Long forward. The man also said nothing, rushing straight towards Lai Diem. The two figures passed each other like flying swallows, the palms of Lai Diem's hand and the shoulders of the other person simultaneously torn apart. Lai Diem thought to himself, both DUAM-DU and Ku Da Du Chi are inheritors of bird species, both at the 10 level. Physically equivalent, the recent confrontation neither won nor lost. At that moment, the system announced that due to the influence of DUAM-DU, the speed of Lai Diem's wound healing only increased by 50%, while the opponent's increased by 200%. Lai Diem knew things weren't good. He called out for Long Jia, but before he could stabilize, the system announced a change in agreement. Currently, the defense of all wandering travelers decreased by 100% due to the influence of the sound-absorbing wine. Lai Diem's defense decreased by 200%, while the opponent's decreased by 50%. The two continued their battle. Hoang Long clashed with the leg bone knife. Lai Diem shouted loudly, "Luong Jia, change the song." Then he launched a straight kick towards the opponent's face, only to be blocked by a kick to his side. The current agreement change increased the movement speed of all wanderers by 50% due to the influence of the sound-absorbing wine. However, Lai Diem's condition continued to deteriorate, despite Luong Jia continuously changing the songs as ordered. Lai Diem always found himself overwhelmed. After 10 rounds of fighting, Hoang Long surged like the tide of the dam river. The two men jumped back, creating distance. The man took off his hat and looked at Lai Diem. "Don't waste your energy anymore. Even though I don't know where you got that thing from your bag, it's unlucky for you to meet me." He wiped the knife blade on his hand lightly. "I'm a music professor in reality, specializing in the history of popular music. As long as you speak up, I've almost researched all genres." The man smiled confidently. At that moment, a small white-faced bird landed on his shoulder. He shook the knife, saying, "This is my turf." Lai Diem didn't say much, switching to the black dragon sword and planting it on the ground. chewing on a carrot. Luong Jia, take a rest. I'll finish him off quickly. Luong Jia interrupted Li Diem, jumping out from the CD player. The man glanced at him, silently thinking that there was no real threat. Luong Jia ran onto the stage with a microphone. So, would you prefer Blue Ready or Happy Metin? The man arrogantly raised 2 fingers, laughing coldly. Li Diem chuckled inwardly. The system identified the musical instrument as a question mark, so he took advantage of the opportunity. He rushed forward, the gun sweeping fiercely towards the man's neck. The man bent his body to avoid it, then ducked down, swiping towards Li Diem's chest. Suddenly, the sound of metal colliding rang out unexpectedly. The man noticed that the knife had a small crack in it, startling him. This blade is sharp, 3 times sharper than ordinary weapons, yet it's still damaged. Seeing the man losing focus, Li Diem swiftly swept across. A twisted air current flew towards Li Diem. He tightly gripped his gun to defend against the attack, and then gently pushed to change its trajectory, stabbing into the nearby tree. The tree immediately bore a 20 centimeters long gash. Li Diem was horrified to realize it was a blade. The man chuckled triumphantly, but Longjia's voice echoed, provoking his ears. Enraged, the man swung multiple blades towards Luongjia. But Li Diem wouldn't let him succeed. Continuously pushing back with his gun, Li Diem suddenly rushed forward, swirling the gun upward, using a technique called Tiger Incineration to open up the opponent. In his mind, he saw Honda being shot dead, each movement deeply imprinted in Li Diem's memory. He lifted his gun with his right hand, pressed his left index finger, and the giant tiger's cannon fired countless beams of white light. Each wave rippled amidst the stream of light, a mark of the gun technique understood by Li Diem, originating from the demonic scripture, the 8 realms of the Golden Lion, called Yemsuanlin, where black clouds swirl and rain pours down. The man fell to the ground, riddled with bullet holes, while Luongjia descended onto the stage. The 2 exchanged smiles, and Li Diem raised his thumb to Luongjia. At that moment, the system's voice resounded, instructing all participants to pay attention to the event's modified content. This time, there would be no possibility of returning before the deadline. All participants must fight until only one remains, taking their last breath, killing the troublemakers to receive the artifact. This could allow all participants to return. But first, a slight disturbance. All battles have been resolved, or participants are still engaged in combat. My name is Buivanho, and my following words are directed at someone named Li Diem. Afterward, he continued, participants with the inheritance of Kovochju naturally have close ties with each other, so listen carefully. Li Diem, first, I know you can hear me. 2 days ago, you killed 4 participants, 2 of whom were my teammates, my close friends in real life. One of them was my girlfriend for 8 years. We entered Diem Phu together, to live or die together. I won't forgive you. There are still a total of 32 Diem Phu participants alive. No one can return before the deadline, but it seems Yemsuanlin has already killed 6 participants, fulfilling the event's requirements, including you. It's dangerous. Just a little more. However, I regret to inform you all that no one can leave Vosen. Looking at the words death without end, you have only 2 options. Either kill me to change the content or kill Li Diem. As long as I track Li Diem's death, I will let everyone go. Finally, I want to say to Li Diem, we are both in the most dangerous situation, which is fair. Let's see who dies first. Li Diem leaned against the tree, slowly eating the carrot he had obtained. Let's see who dies first. The timeline rewound 5 minutes ago. Chetyudao had just defeated his final opponent, muttering, a gentleman doesn't stand under the wall. Dangerous. Chetyudao's 8 technique skills had almost been mastered. He could now transform them into significant combat power. However, one crucial point was still missing, and in Chetyudao's mind appeared an image of Li Diem, the most dangerous individual. He would neither hide nor stop, always focusing on becoming stronger, rather than just surviving. Who wouldn't want to be strong? But you still need to stay alive. Death ends everything. Baekuan has honestly killed 6 people. With Yemsuanlin's inheritance, our group has gathered enough. The remaining participants are just stubborn and crazy. Whoever follows to the end is foolish. Thinking so, Chaitudao silently called the system to return. His figure began to emit golden light and then gradually disappeared. But just as he was about to vanish completely, the system's voice resounded. Participants, pay attention to the modified event content. Chaitudao is disappearing. Hurriedly looking at his now visible body, Chaitudao grabbed his hair, gritted his teeth, and cursed. Just 2 more inches to go, damn it. When I find out I can't return. Nami stood in an abandoned phone booth, worriedly reporting, I can't come back anymore. Someone used high-level equipment to lock me up. This is hopeless. On the other end of the line, a deep and seductive female voice said, just stay hidden. Don't attract attention, and I'll take care of the rest. Nami hung up the phone, his face darkened, and he stepped out of the booth. Damn it, it's a mess. A courier-type ship getting involved with these lunatics. The rain comes and goes so quickly. Lydium sat under the tree, analyzing the situation. After 2 nights of fighting, he had acquired 2 inheritances. As long as he used them all, he could instantly reach 47% enlightenment, undoubtedly achieving a breakthrough. There would surely be additional rewards this time, but he wondered what effects the 2 new inheritances would have. Diwamdu's speech enhancement increases shouting by 90% and the speed of hand movements. Huiden's music enhancement increases the power of any music. Listening to dual music receives double enhancement, while listening to melancholic music receives an extremely strong enhancement. Tin Dao enhances the right to counterattack. It's a true and unique martial art, wielding high-quality weapons that can emit invisible power. It requires sophisticated weapons. The system reminded participants that they could replace inheritances to receive the Tin Dao enhancement, but if they use it to increase enlightenment, they won't receive this enhancement. Note that besides inheritance replacement, there is also the possibility of inheritance evolution. Inheritance evolution can only enhance after increasing enlightenment. Lydium was astonished by the inheritance, even more so that it could evolve. How intriguing to initiate close combat specialization against the opponent, seizing the opportunity, unleashing the tiger trap, and then executing the piercing through technique, causing a burst of bloody battle. The 9 Phoenix's reinforced ice style proved effective, defeating most of the participants. Both swordsmanship and spear fighting were formidable, but the substitution of the Kudaryuki Lin was truly heart-wrenching. However, if the Kudaryuki Lin evolved, it would be perfect. Currently, the skills were sealed, unable to use the most vital Hong Hat Fiend. It was difficult to predict the details of the battle, especially this confrontation with Nam Diuamdiu. The man himself was agile and unmatched in close combat, but lacked physical strength for long-range attacks. These were all weaknesses. Thinking so, Lydium decided to use the Long Oki summoning, calling forth characters from the 24 spirits. The target of summoning was the 9th spirit, Toto. Suddenly, the sky appeared with white feathers falling from above, revealing the alluring face of Toto in front of Lydium. Toto flew to Lydium's side, softly addressing him. But before Lydium could respond, Toto pressed his face against his chest and murmured, "Sir, why do you smell like a woman?" Then, turning around, his voice became weak. "It's nothing, Lydium. I didn't notice." Lydium felt a little confused, thinking that Toto's black feathers might have defensive capabilities, swirling wind and waves from his wings, with a range of influence up to 500 meters, which would certainly be more useful than the feathers alone. He had heard that she had come to Minkwak. Was that true? Above, Longosen finally got bored. "Sir, where are you going?" Toto could carry people. Lydium gently refused Toto's offer, and she flew down the street, asking Sir about the deserted world. Was this his true homeland? "We'll talk about that later. I've sent your birds away. Please help me watch out for someone who behaves like me," Lydium instructed. Before he could respond, Toto sensed something unusual. Indeed, it was Taithao. Lydium quickly told Toto to fly high and seize the opportunity to act. The sound of a roaring engine came from a distance, and a sleek motorcycle appeared in front of Lydium. The man on the bike looked at him, not knowing what to expect. "Let's see what you've got," he said, drawing out a self-made spear, charging towards Lydium. In an instant, Their weapons clashed, emitting a friction sound. The man realized Diem wasn't easy to deal with, immediately speeding away. The brief encounter let Diem know about the inheritance of the opponent, the claws of the stormy beast, capable of sucking in any object to release energy onto another. Maximum energy absorption increased with enlightenment according to the Sun High scripture. There was a creature resembling a white-skinned fish, reptile human, named the Stormy Beast. It ran faster when eating. The man chuckled triumphantly. Nothing to fear. The speed of the battle blade is overwhelming. Even if he has a hot weapon, he can't hit me or catch up. Suddenly, a hand was placed on his shoulder. 2 spots of blood made his heart race. He didn't know when the demon had sat behind him. Before he could react, his body was thrown by the demon. Black feathers fell from above, piercing through the man. The system's voice resounded. Unfortunately, you didn't receive his inheritance. Looking at the corpse on the ground, Toto asked in surprise, "What's his name, sir?" Diem looked at the motorcycle stopped, his eyes gleaming with joy. He might have brought the vehicle for us. The sound of tires rubbing against the ground echoed. Diem appeared again in front of the entrance to the alley. He took out a carrot, instructing Toto to follow him, then walked straight into the bustling alley. A girl stuffed something into her mouth. Behind her, Mao Tu Truong suddenly appeared. Diem pulled his hand. "Mr. Tao is looking for you." Diem coldly looked at Mao Tu Truong, wiping the blood off his hands with his shirt sleeve. The man wearing glasses looked weak but ruthless. He was the 13th death, defeating Kavo Thuong in Fangievian. Maybe you're familiar with him. Diem's face was quite unappealing at the moment. He said the guy won in advance, right? Why do I see so many fat chunks of meat like this? Mao Tu Truong summarized Van Ho's situation. Diem also knew roughly about the incident. Then Diem asked Mao Tu Truong, who was smiling. Kavo Thuong lost to the guy with glasses. Where is he now? Mao Tu Truong's smile faded, becoming serious. My brothers have a favor to ask. Fangievian is different from us. They're bold and ruthless. They're still hot now. If you come, you won't be able to ask for anything but lose money. Hearing that, Diem laughed. Okay, this time I want to explore Fangievian to find out. Why didn't Van Ho pay them back, and we broke into Fan Rev Vien? Van Ho won't have to repay the debt, right? Meanwhile, on top of Chuvo's finger, a drop of green water formed, inside clearly showing Diem's figure. Chu Tam murmured against the wall, I can't stand Van Ho's emotions. Chuvo sighed, I've fought with Diem before, so I understand him a bit, and finding him is easier. So now Diem is the target, clear and difficult to deal with. As for Van Ho, we'll find him first. If he's not there, then we'll find Diem. First, let's gather information about Van Ho at An Bei's place, then we'll go to Indo. One of the 3 An Bei brothers has a royal residence. Chuvo's face became unattractive. Why can't I go in? The middle-aged man waved his hand. Mao Tu Truong said you destroyed stuff in the alley. Haven't compensated yet. All the shops in Yendo have banned you. Chiu Tam turned her eyes down. So can you go in? The man rolled his eyes, thinking, do you think I'm blind or stupid? Chiu Tam was furious. What should Chuvo do now? Chuvo looked at Chiu Tam and said, let's wait until midnight, there will surely be some movement. As dawn breaks, Vosun sits drinking at the gate of Kwaktujium. He spent 2,000 points to buy information about all the participants. This time, Van Ho clearly has plans with everyone. According to data, both Diem and Van Ho are rated 10, with enlightenment at 39%, deadlocked. He only needs 7 units of strength to confront them. In the dormitory of a factory, Van Ho stayed up all night, looking at the log in his bag, sighing about the tangled threads. On the rooftop of an unfinished building outside the city, black feathers fell. Diem stood amidst the experimental whirlwind of items bought from An Bei, using the Tiu Tuat, a delicate work of art by Luong Hu Lan in ancient times, increasing vitality by 50% for participants, applying only to those below Thapto level. It could block Toto's feathers, enhancing vitality, aiding in healing wounds, and exerting strength more easily. Ledium smiled satisfied with the successful search. Toto flapped his wings and landed, holding a red lantern. Ledium didn't know what it was for, but it was even more expensive than Tiu Twiat and the notes, only used for the non-human bloodline. But Toto said it was good. Mao Tu Truom also gave him another small antique copper item. After a while, he spent all his money.